You wake up every morning, check your bank account, and wonder where your money went. Your paycheck looks the same as it did 5 years ago, but somehow everything costs more. Your rent, your groceries, your car payment, even your morning coffee. Politicians blame inflation. Economists point to supply chains. The media talks about global uncertainty. But what if I told you that's not the real reason you're getting poorer? The man who predicted the 2008 crash and just went 100% cash again, Michael Burry, sees something completely different. While the rest of the world is still arguing about inflation, Burry is sitting on the sidelines, refusing to own stocks or bonds. Why? Because he knows the inflation story everyone's telling you is hiding something much bigger, much more systematic, and much more devastating to your financial future. There's a pattern playing out in America right now that has nothing to do with rising prices and everything to do with where your money is actually going. While you've been told to tighten your belt and wait for things to get better, $50 trillion has been systematically transferred from working families to the wealthiest Americans over the past 4 decades. That's not a typo. $50 trillion. That's $297,000 per household that should have stayed in your pocket but ended up somewhere else entirely. This isn't about partisan politics or economic theory. This is about mathematical reality. The numbers don't lie. And once you see what Michael Burry already sees, you'll understand why your dollar doesn't stretch like it used to. Why could your parents buy a house on 1 income while you can barely afford rent on 2? Why productivity keeps rising but your paycheck stays flat. The system has been redesigned, and you weren't invited to the meeting. Let me show you exactly how this wealth transfer works, who's really benefiting, and why even the guy who called 2008 is now 100% cash. Because understanding what Burry understands is the first step to protecting yourself from what's coming next. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. You open your banking app every Friday, stare at the direct deposit number, and it feels familiar. Too familiar. Same dollars, same purchasing power as the guy punching the clock in 1980. 43 years of iPhones, Amazon Prime, robots, AI, the internet, everything moving at light speed, and the typical American worker's real take-home is exactly where it was when Reagan took office. 0. Net progress. Let that land. The economy didn't stall. It detonated upward. Productivity, the actual value you squeeze out of an hour of human effort, absolutely exploded. Corporate profits hit levels that would make a 1920s robber baron blush. The S&P 500 is up something like 3,000% in real terms. Trillions of dollars of new wealth got minted. So I'm going to ask the question the TV economists never ask, and the same question Michael Burry, the guy who saw 2008 coming and just went 100% cash again, has already answered for himself. That's the exact same question Michael Burry asked himself before he closed his fund and went 100% cash again. Where the hell did it all go? Because between 1980 and 2022, the data is brutal and clean. Bottom 90% of workers, real wage growth, approximately 36%. Top 1%, 162%. Top 0.1%, the real players, 301%. That's not effort, that's not innovation, that's redistribution on a scale that makes a casino look charitable. Rewind to 1963. The richest families had about 36 times the wealth of a median household. Fast forward to 2022, that ratio doubled to 71 times. Today, the top 10% own more than 2/3 of everything in the country. The bottom half of Americans, 150 million people, split 2.5%. That's not inequality anymore. That's feudalism with better branding. This isn't random. This isn't capitalism doing its thing. This is a structured, deliberate transfer that began in the late 1970s and has been running on autopilot ever since. And the scariest part, most people still think it's just inflation or bad luck. It's not. It's math. Cold, relentless, asymmetric math. And once you see the numbers laid out like this, plain, unfiltered, the same numbers Michael Burry is staring at while he sits on a mountain of cash, you can't unsee them. You realize the game isn't broken, it's fixed. Picture this like a marriage that looked perfect for 30 straight years. From the 1940s clear through the late 1970s, productivity and wages walked hand in hand down the aisle. You produced more per hour, the company made more money, a chunk of that extra cash landed in your paycheck. Simple, fair, automatic. They moved together so perfectly you could set your watch to it. Then, sometime around 1978, 1979, the divorce papers got quietly signed. Productivity kept climbing, kept sprinting actually. Since 1979, it's up roughly 70 to 80% depending on whose data set you trust, and I trust the ones that haven't been massaged by lobbyists. Wages for the typical worker, up about 12. That's not a rounding error. That's a rounding error. Do the math in your head. You're now cranking out 70 to 80% more economic value every hour than your dad did in the same job, wearing the same hard hat, running the same machine. Only now the machine has computers and the hard hat has Bluetooth. You're 70 to 80% better at creating wealth. And your reward? You get paid almost exactly the same in real terms. That gap, the 60+ percentage points that vanished, isn't evaporation, it's extraction. Pure, surgical, relentless extraction. This is why Burry doesn't own a single stock or bond right now. He already knows where the missing 70% went. That missing slice didn't float away into the ether. It got rerouted, vacuumed upward into corner offices, private jets, and Cayman accounts. Trillions of dollars that should have compounded inside middle-class households instead compounded inside the portfolios of the ownership class. This isn't some fringe theory. This is the cleanest, clearest, most undeniable data set in modern economics. The charts look like a heart monitor that flatlines for labor while the other line shoots to the moon for capital. And the wild part, nobody in power wants to talk about the divorce. They'd rather blame global competition or automation or you should have learned to code. But the numbers don't care about excuses. They just sit there, cold and quiet, proving the heist in high definition. Once you see this chart, really see this chart, everything else clicks. You realize the system didn't break. It was executed flawlessly. Let me take you back to a time when the game still had rules. Before 1982, if a public company used its profits to aggressively repurchase its own shares, the SEC treated it like the market manipulation it was. You could do it under narrow, tightly policed conditions, basically illegal. Everyone understood why. It's a quiet way for insiders to pump the price, cash out, and leave the company hollowed out. Then, in one quiet rule change under Reagan, SEC Rule 10b-18, the cage door swung wide open. Suddenly, corporations could vacuum billions out of their own treasuries, hand it straight to shareholders, and call it returning capital. Overnight, the biggest legalized wealth transfer machine in history went live. Fast forward to the numbers, because numbers don't lie, and they don't take bribes. Between 2003 and 2012 alone, the companies in the S&P 500 burned through roughly $2.4 trillion buying their own stock. That's 54% of their total earnings. Throw in dividends, and you're looking at 91 cents of every dollar earned going straight out the door to people who already own the equity, instead of into wages, R&D, or anything that might help the people doing the actual work. Why would any sane management team do this? Because somewhere along the line, we changed the incentives so hard that CEOs stopped running companies and started running slot machines with the stock ticker as the jackpot readout. Today, 80 to 90% of a typical Fortune 500 CEO's pay is tied to stock price. Not revenue, not innovation, not employee retention, stock price, period. So when the board hands the CEO a few $100 million in stock options, the fastest, most reliable way to make those options explode in value is to take the cash the workers just made, generated, and use it to shrink the number of shares outstanding. Basic supply-demand. Fewer shares chasing the same earnings equals higher price per share equals CEO prints money. It's not complicated. It's a feedback loop designed by people who already own the assets to make sure more assets keep flowing their way. And they never stopped. 2018, the year after the Trump tax cut handed corporations a $1 trillion windfall, $806 billion went right back into buybacks. 2020, while you were wearing a mask at the grocery store and small businesses were boarding up windows, another $521 billion in buybacks. That's money that never became raises, never became new factories, never became training programs or better health plans. It just got torched in the open market to juice a ticker symbol for 12 months so a handful of executives could buy another Gulfstream. Every single buyback dollar is a dollar that was never allowed to reach the real economy. Every buyback dollar is another reason Michael Burry is sitting on cash instead of playing the Wall Street casino. This isn't capitalism. This is state-sanctioned looting with extra steps. And the craziest part? It's still perfectly legal. Once you see this mechanism for what it is, you realize the casino isn't rigged. It was built that way on purpose. There's a second machine running in plain sight, and most people never even notice the gears turning. Go back to the 1980s again. That same decade when buybacks got legalized, something else died quietly. Antitrust enforcement. The people in charge decided big wasn't dangerous anymore. They rewrote the rules so mergers only got blocked if consumer prices went up in the short term. Everything else, wages, innovation, democracy, was declared irrelevant. Result? Corporate America turned into a handful of cartel kingdoms faster than anyone thought possible. Today, in roughly 9 out of 10 major industries, 4 or fewer companies control 80% or more of the market. Airlines, telecom, beer, eyeglasses, mattresses, pharmacies, banking, search engines, social media, chicken processing, you name it. Levels of concentration we haven't seen since the original trusts that Teddy Roosevelt went after with a baseball bat. When 4 giants quietly agree not to compete, magic happens. For them. On the labor side, you have nowhere else to go, so they don't have to bid up your wage. Job switchers used to get 8 to 10% raises just for moving companies. Now it's 2 to 3% if you're lucky. They know it, they collude, sometimes openly with no-poach agreements, and they keep the savings. On the consumer side, same 4 giants set the price floor. No rogue discounter crashing the party. So they mark up goods way above cost and dare you to walk away. Corporate profit margins have tripled since 1980, from roughly 20% over production cost to 60% plus today. That extra 40 cents on every dollar isn't because they got magically more efficient, it's because they removed the competition that used to force them to pass savings on to you. They squeeze your paycheck from the bottom and your grocery bill from the top. Same corporations, same day, double dip. And the pattern repeats everywhere now. Housing. Wall Street buyers, Blackstone, Invitation Homes, etc., hoover up entire subdivisions with all-cash offers, turn would-be owners into permanent renters, then jack rents 10 to 15% a year because inventory is artificially scarce. Healthcare. Private equity roll-ups buy every dermatologist, dentist, and vet clinic in town, fire half the staff, triple the fees. Pharma. Take a drug invented with your tax dollars, slap a fresh patent on a minor tweak, charge $500 for a pill that costs $4 to make, and then use the profits for, guess what, more buybacks. Banking. $37 overdraft on a $3 coffee because 4 megabanks control 60% of deposits, and they all independently decided that's the fair price for being broke. This isn't free market genius. This is toll booth economics. 4 companies owning everything in sight, that's exactly the kind of rigged game Burry refuses to fund. They own the only road, they charge whatever they want, and they split the take. The technical term is rent-seeking, but let's call it what it is: a protection racket with better lobbyists. And the best part for them? You still call it inflation while they bank the difference. Once you trace the money, you realize the economy isn't competitive anymore. It's extracted. One zip code, one industry, one necessity at a time. Here's where most people reach for the remote or scroll away. Don't. Because everything you just saw, the frozen wages, the divorced productivity chart, the buyback casino, the monopoly toll booths, it's all still running right now, 24/7, silent and unstoppable. And the perfect camouflage? The word you hear on every screen every night: inflation. Inflation is real. Prices do go up. You feel it at the pump, the checkout lane, the rent notice. It's loud, immediate, emotional. That's why it works so beautifully as the fall guy. While everyone screams about eggs and gas, Michael Burry is quietly watching the real theft happen in plain sight. While you're raging at eggs or interest rates, no one's asking the forbidden question: why, after 40 years of miracles in efficiency and output, does the typical household have less breathing room than their parents did on one income? The answer isn't supply chains in China or stimulus checks in 2021. The answer is that a multi-trillion-dollar extraction architecture was built, piece by deliberate piece: lower capital gains taxes, shredded labor laws, toothless antitrust, deregulated banks, stock-tied CEO pay, private equity roll-ups, patent evergreening, fee-maximizing algorithms, and then turned on full blast. It hums in the background like electricity. You don't see the current, you just feel the shock every paycheck. Your extra productivity? Captured. Your bargaining power? Crushed. Your future home equity? Converted into someone else's rental stream. Your tax dollars that funded the research? Monetized back to you at 10,000% markup. Your tiny overdraft? Harvested as pure profit. This isn't a cycle. It's a designed, self-reinforcing spiral that moves wealth from the many to the few every hour of every day, legally and relentlessly. The machine doesn't care which party is in office. It doesn't care if inflation is 2% or 9%. It just keeps running. But here's the part they don't want you to realize. Machines can be dismantled. Not with pitchforks, not tomorrow, but with eyes wide open, with millions of people who finally see the wiring diagram and refuse to look away. The moment enough of us stop blaming inflation and start naming the actual mechanisms, the buybacks, the markups, the monopolies, the tax code, the incentives, that moment is the moment the game loses its invisibility cloak. And invisible games are the only kind that stay rigged forever. So look around. Look at the numbers again. Let them burn in. Your money isn't vanishing because prices rose. It's vanishing because the system was rebuilt to take it long before you ever see it. Michael Burry saw it coming, sold everything, and went 100% cash. See the machine. Then decide whether you're okay living inside it. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's exactly how every rigged game in history finally ends.